I'm going to start with Paul here. I think I know the answer to this question, but is the Chancellor gambling with the economy, Paul?
I was going to say I was going to give you 3 guesses to decide what my view was.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about a gamble. I think it probably is a gamble. But more importantly, I think it was a mini budget for the rich, for bankers, for fat cats, for the city money men. It was not a budget for hard-pressed Britain. It was not a budget for hard-working, ordinary Britons out there in the provinces and the towns of our country who are experiencing this cost of living crisis, who are experiencing a crash in living standards, a fall in real wages, and who I think were looking for some real tangible support from the government, instead of which we've been given effectively a Robin Hood budget, but in reverse, with the poor giving to the rich. And I think it's Thatcherism Mark II. We are borrowing, and this is the thing, and this is the politics of it as much as the economics of it. We're borrowing billions of pounds to give to tax cuts to the wealthiest in our society at a time when the poorest in our society are having it extremely tough. Well, for me, indefensible.
Well, Paul, it's not just the wealthy that are getting tax cuts, and I want to bring David Maddox in here because I saw you nodding vigorously in the negative direction when Paul was speaking there. David, what's your view on the mini-budget?
Look, tax cuts create wealth. They put money back into people's pockets. They allow people to spend their money in the economy. Yeah, and it wasn't just the 45p rate that there was an enormous amount for help for energy bills. In fact, their biggest borrowing was actually to help people with their energy bills. There was the basic rate of income tax is at its lowest rate now in history, I think, actually. And it's this is this was actually not just for the rich. Actually, it helped right across the board. And there were important things there, like getting rid of the national insurance rise, which have really hurt the lower income people and the middle income people much more than the upper income people, and bringing down or cancelling the corporation tax rise, which allows companies to invest here, to come over here to create jobs. So it's an easy hit to say, an easy headline to say, oh, this was a budget for the rich. It's absolute nonsense.
What's interesting, I think, Paul, this morning, Keir Starmer has said that he would bring back the top rate of tax when he gets into government, he says, but he would keep the income tax reduction, in other words, the 20 to 19p. So he's even picking and choosing as to what he likes from this mini-budget.
I mean, I think there's an argument to say there should be targeted tax cuts for the poorest in our society. I think, it's arguable to say that at a time of a cost of living crisis, give the poorest people more of their money. But there is no question that the tax cuts at the top end, the scrapping of the 45p rate, the reduction of the corporation tax, for example, are going to put thousands, if not millions of pounds into the pockets of people who are already the most wealthiest in society. They are the people who unquestionably will benefit from this. And, this is, let's be blunt, this is a return to trickle-down economics. This is a return to a philosophy that says if we can make the rich richer, if we can give them even more wealth than they've already got, then eventually some of that wealth in the form of crumbs will reach the table of the people at the lowest end of society. It was a philosophy that the Tories applied in the 1980s, and I think we are still suffering in many respects the legacy of that in terms of or we did for many years at least, in terms of underfunded public services, in terms of widening of the gap between rich and poor, increases in wealth and income inequality, and so on. And this, for me, Arlene, was the epitome of this. For any government at this moment to say, we're going to scrap the cap on bankers' bonuses at a time when we're telling the public sector, for example, that there isn't enough in the pot to be able to give them decent pay increases. I mean, as you know, my industry is the fire service in terms of my primary job. And firefighters have been offered 2% this year. These were the people who kept working during the pandemic, during the recent heat wave. They were on the front line and so on. And they've been told, we can't afford more than 2%. At the same time, the government is saying, but we can afford to borrow billions and to give tax cuts to the richest. That, to me, shows the priorities of the government.
Well, to push back a little bit on the bankers' bonuses, as I understand, they were finding a way around that in any event and paying bankers more, actually, instead of incentivising them to do more in terms of productivity. And that's what they're saying now. Let us look at productivity instead of just paying people more to keep them here. And secondly, corporation tax. I mean, I feel quite strongly about this. When I look at my nearest neighbour in the Republic of Ireland, they have corporation tax at 12.5%. And as you know, that is their primary tool to get inward investment into the Republic of Ireland. And they guard that very jealously. They will not allow Europe, and they have always pushed back when Europe has tried to get them to raise the level of corporation tax. They keep it at 12.5%. So it works for them, Paul.
Well, it shouldn't be a race to the bottom, in my view. And look, I'm not suggesting punitive rates of taxation. You know, I'm not suggesting that we put tax, whether it's corporation tax or whether it's personal income tax, at such a ridiculously high level that people don't invest or that they do go abroad. But at the same time, there has to be a balance. We have to say, look, at the moment, real wages are falling, living standards are falling, the poorest in our society are having it really tough, we've got underfunded public services. Is it the right time during a cost of living crisis to say that we're going to draft a budget that essentially puts more money in the pocket of the richest and not the poorest in society? And you know, just imagine, Arlene, I make this point, just imagine if the Labour Party under Corbyn, for example, had said we're going to borrow billions in, you know, it's going to be unfunded, we're not entirely sure how we're going to pay it back. Jeremy Corbyn argued that we should borrow when interest rates were low in order to invest, which I think is perfectly legitimate, actually. But imagine that the Labour Party had come forward with some sort of mini budget, which had had the effect in terms of the markets that it's had in terms of the pound lowering against the dollar quite seriously. Now, I don't think that's necessarily a massive...
Well, neither do I, because of exports, obviously.
Well, exactly, for all sorts of reasons. But you can imagine what the media reaction would have been.